Hi everybody, it is early morning, so it's quite dark out. The light is going to get better and better as the day progresses. So I am just going to be working on our lighthouse here, and this is part of the beginner cross stitch series. Of course, anybody is welcome to watch this stitch along, but if you're a very beginner and you're working on this project with me, then you are going to recognize this picture and this pattern, and working on it together should be pretty fun. Now, I plan on stitching on this one for quite some time. The whole thing isn't going to be a chatty stitch along. I will be speeding up because, you know, I only have so much stuff to talk about. But if you're new to the crafting world and you found my channel, welcome to YouTube, to the crafting community on YouTube. Something that you will see a lot in the stitching world is these Stitch With Me's. You'll also see them sometimes called like whip and chat, which stands for work in progress and chat. I haven't heard that term quite as much lately, but it might just be the channels that I'm watching. I do not profess to know everything about YouTube, everything about crafting, or even everything about stitching. I am just here to kind of be your friend, the friend who knows a little bit about cross stitch and wants to hang out with you. So I hope you want to be my friend too. If not, that's fine. Just don't tell me about it. I hope everyone is having a really nice day, whether you're working on this project or your own project. I hope you are having a good time with your project. I hope your stitching is going easy. I chose to work on this hoop for this project, even though it's such a simple project and small, could be probably stitched in hand, but for filming, I think this is easier for getting a good view that's not too out of focus, that's not too wibble wobble, although it is a little bit. So it's a snowy day. This year has been very warm and we've had very little snow so far. And last night it started really coming down. When I went to the grocery store after work, it was like insane. I could barely see in front of my face. You know, when you're trying to even just walk to your car and the snow is blowing into your, I mean, some of you are probably in Texas and have no idea what I'm talking about, but some of you are in Canada and you know what I'm talking about, or Michigan or something. It was really coming down, and I thought there was going to be a huge buildup of snow this morning, but it was kind of a short-lived, at least in my area, just really fast and hard. And then by this morning, when my husband left for work, he's working overtime this weekend, he said it was raining this morning. So it's right in that somewhere in between freeze and thaw temperature, which is kind of the worst, because what happens is the snow comes down, it melts, it refreezes into sheets of ice. Not so fun. Your car door freezes shut. Oh my gosh. Okay, so for those of you who do not live, oh, I have a little clip of some snow from the other day about Canadian snow, and I will insert that clip right now. For anyone who doesn't live in a place that snows, this right here is the most beautiful fluffy snow. You can see it's coming straight down and it's slowly falling,
And that means that it's probably a decent temperature outside. The wind isn't going to make your face hurt. And this makes like nice heavy packing snow that's good for like making snowmen and stuff, and it coats the trees and makes them look really pretty. This is pretty much the only acceptable type of snow. All other snow basically sucks.
All right, so that's just sort of like pleasant snow. That wasn't last night's snow. Last night's snow was blizzard. The other thing that happened is at about, I don't know, 4 or 5 a.m., the snowplow came by, and I don't know what this guy was doing. He must have had his plow lowered. Like, they can lift it up and lower it a bit so that they just kind of skim the road. This guy must have had his plow right down to the ground. It sounded like an earthquake or the apocalypse when he drove by. Like, it was insane. And then even as he was doing other streets around us, it was so loud. And I don't know, they don't usually, I mean, they always make a lot of noise, but this was just an intense amount of noise. So if you're watching this video like way later, and it's the middle of summer, just think about how lucky you are that it isn't winter and you're not dealing with this right now. I know a lot of people who say that they love the seasons, they love fall, they love winter, blah, blah. How could you live in a place that it's only ever one temperature? I could. I completely could. Take me to, or somewhere that it just doesn't change a lot, as long as it's nice. Not like it never changes because it's the North Pole. All right, I'm gonna continue on this section and I am just gonna speed it up. Actually, before I speed it up, just for beginners, I wanna go over, so I'm coming to the point in my thread where, let me just show you, let me bring it to the front, where there's not much tail there and I need to get more tail. So what I find is if you pull on your thread like this, the tail is not going to lengthen. But if you put your needle at 90 degrees and pull, and if your tail is all wound around, if you kind of flick it like that, then I don't know if you saw that, but it allowed me to just pull and make more tail. So 90 degrees and flick. And if the flicking doesn't work, you might need to kind of unwind the two threads because they do tend to get kind of wrapped around each other. But the pull and flick is a really great method for getting more of a tail on your thread. All right, now I will speed it up. All right, I want to just pause here because I got a little knot in the back, which I could feel because I keep my finger just lightly on the back. So with these knots, sometimes you can just gently pull them. Let me see if I can zoom. Oops, wrong way. So sometimes you can just gently pull at them. But if it's not coming out, then you need to kind of stick your needle into a different kind of loop that's showing and then pull. And see, that pulled it open, and I'm sorry it's a little bit blurry focused like that, and my cat is shaking the camera, but that undid the knot. So just keep a finger on the back as you pull through to make sure you don't end up with one of those knots. Okay, I want to show you something again for beginners. Let's see if I can zoom in. These, I know it's not as clear when I zoom in. These last couple of stitches, the top bar looks very skinny compared to, like, say down here. And when you're doing it yourself, I think you'll kind of notice what I mean. It's hard to really see. But you know, you have fat bar here, you can kind of see all three little threads, and then over here they look twisted. Okay, at the same time, when I put my needle through, you'll see the thread is twisting up on its own, and when I pull through, it's kind of twisting up. Maybe not so much that time, but so the thing that I do to help that is I just hang my thread down. Sorry about all the wires on the floor. I let it kind of untwirl itself. Maybe I'll pull out a little bit more thread, and this should really in general take care of that phenomenon. And usually that's enough to get back to those nice fat stitches. Let me just do a couple. So it's often just kind of your thread is getting twisted up and the separate fibers of the thread are not sitting as flat. So let's see if that helped. All right, so we had this like really twisted one, and then these ones are a little bit flatter. This one is definitely flatter. This one's flatter. Maybe that one's still a little twisted, but it did kind of help. So if you are coming, like if your stitches start to look a little funny, they look a little wiry, you know, there are some ways to tackle that. All right, let's continue. Here's something else that I've found that helps if those stitches start to get really thin is you take your needle right down to your stitching and you kind of re-pull it through and make a new tail. Sometimes that's enough to sort of pull those threads back into a nicer alignment. You'll find like some threads, so some colors will be of a different quality than other colors. Some colors, and maybe this is just because I buy cheaper kits, maybe if you spend a lot of money, you don't run into this as much, but you'll have some threads that feel really soft and fluffy and they make beautiful crosses, and then you'll get to the next color and they'll make these little stringy thin X's. And that is just the way it is with these particular types of kits. You know, hopefully you get all beautiful threads in your pattern, but chances are you're going to have one or two kind of not as cooperative threads. I'm sorry if you hear that kind of banging in the background. My cat, this is what he does. Oh, now he's not going to do it now that I'm looking, but he chews on those blinds and they go bang, 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 bang. What are you doing, Hansel? Something I should note, some of the chat from me today has been about like thread management, and I did not cut this thread. I used the full length that came in the kit to do this, and I'm still working on that first thread that we separated. We separated it into the 2 separate strands, and I'm still working on the first set of 2 strands. So if you are beginning and you're having some trouble with threads knotting up, or whatever issues, you can certainly cut that thread into shorter lengths. Like cutting it in half would be probably a good idea for people who are newer and aren't used to kind of dealing with tangles and knots and stuff. And of course you could cut it even shorter. I wouldn't go too short, just because changing your thread over and over again can be in itself an annoying problem. But certainly cutting it in half, you wouldn't have to change it very often. I'm sometimes surprised at how little coverage you get from one thread. Like, this seems like a lot in proportion to the image, but if you think of working on a giant canvas, a small section like this with one thread, it doesn't seem like much. When I work on my cross stitches at lunch at work, sometimes, I mean, I have to do stuff at lunch at work. I have to get my lunch, I have to eat my lunch, blah blah. But sometimes I'm amazed I can only get through one thread in an entire lunch hour, and I think, oh my goodness, this is a big time commitment for small progress. But if you're sitting there and you don't have to deal with the other necessities of lunch, plus the kind of just getting everything out and getting set up, it goes a little faster. All right, I've made it to the end of this place, and this is a convenient place for me to trim my thread. You'll see there's, only a couple inches left. Most kits give you plenty of extra. And in my bigger kits, I would still continue to use this thread, but in this tiny kit, there's very little green left that we need. So I'm gonna start a new thread to finish off here, partly because I ended here and I've got to jump over there. Now that's a really tiny jump, but between jumping and not having a lot of thread left, I'm going to finish off. So as I showed you before in the other video, to finish off, you just go under a few stitches, and you can go just under the stitches like this. Let me see if I can zoom in. Yeah, I know it gets a little out of focus zooming in, but, or what I like to do is I like to actually go under the Ada that goes in that direction. It's a tighter closure, and also it hides that thread that goes across. And again, if you're not concerned about messy backs, that's not as important. And honestly, I've seen all types of backs, neat, messy, and it really doesn't matter. If someone tries to tell you that having a neat back is superior in some way morally, they are wrong. It might make it a little less bulky, and like, I personally like the look of a neater back, but really nobody cares except for the person doing the project. So you do it however you want. If you want a messy back, do a messy back. If you couldn't be bothered, that's fine. I personally like that neater look, so going under the Ada is nice. It does, I think, maybe even make it a little bit more bulky to go like actually under that Ada like that. But this is how I like it. So there's the first color almost done. Now I'm going to come in and I'm going to do a few jumps, and we need to think about conserving our threads, not having too many big jumps. Now again, in this kit we have a lot of extra embroidery floss, so we don't actually have to worry about that. But with other kits where we don't know if we have enough, I like to make as small a jump as possible when possible. So I would kind of like do this part and then do that small jump up there. Go one direction up, back down, little jump there. So that's how I would tackle that. Again, if you're not concerned about how much thread you have, you could even just go across, jump, and then go back, and you could do the same up here, across and back jump, across and back jump, and jump. Either way is fine. Whatever you're best able to keep track of as well. You don't want to get like finish and then realize you only had one bar over here and you have to come back and make one single cross. That's always annoying. So let me continue. And I think I'm not sure. I'm going to go back and look at the footage sped up and see if it's too much moving around and jiggling between my hand moving and the cat walking on the table and shaking the camera. I may or may not have inserted those sped up clips, or we may have just jumped to the next segment. But let me go ahead and I'm going to get a little more progress done on some of these other colors. And then if you're stitching along with me and you want to learn French knots, don't do these bits up here. Don't do these little dots up here. We'll do those in French knots. I think it'll look nice. This blob I'm going to do in regular stitch, this green blob, and the body of the bird I'm going to do in those in full cross. But all of these little dots, I'm going to do French knots. All right, let's continue. Okay, so I finished the blue off camera, and I decided to go to a color that there's barely any stitches just to get these like smaller colors done. So I picked, this is color number 2. It's got the purple backslashes, and there were 3 stitches here. And then we have to jump up to here. And something to consider, it's not crucial, it's not going to ruin your pattern if you do it wrong, but something to think about is that this is a fairly dark color. And this fabric has a lot of holes in it, and there are areas where we are not going to be covering it fully with stitches. So if I jumped to the next thread, let me just finish that stitch. If the next thread was over here, potentially you would see little dots of this dark thread poking through the canvas. So again, think about where that thread is going on the back. I finished the hole here and I need to jump to up here. So if I jump across here, there's no stitching going to cover it up. So I stopped here, I need to jump up to this, so I'm going to go across to this hole here. That way the entire jump will be hidden behind this when I stitch this. So again, like all of these problems that I'm stating or potential things are not as crucial in a tiny canvas like this. But I just wanted to make you aware of these, because when you're working on a bigger canvas with darker thread and larger jumps, this might be an issue. So that's my tip of the moment. My other tip is you'll see I'm making backslashes across a symbol that's backslashes. So just watch and be careful that you're actually doing all the stitches because these are almost impossible to see that I've done that bottom row in one direction. All right, I will continue on. I think I'm not going to bother doing the sped up footage because I think that it's just too wiggly, and I don't want to make you guys sick trying to watch a sped up version of me jiggling and wiggling this thing around. Sometimes it's very difficult to find the hole when you're working on the back. That's a skill that comes really quickly, getting better like awareness of where you're pushing the needle up. When I started working on a really big canvas, I all of a sudden had to start stitching with my left hand. I had to keep my right hand underneath the fabric and stitch with my left hand. And the first few days I was doing it, holy moly, it was awkward. And I could barely hold the needle. I was kind of like holding it like this and like trying to push it in. It was very awkward. But within, you know, a few days, a week or so, I started getting more and more confident working with my left hand. And now, I mean, it's not as good as my right hand, obviously, but when I'm working from the top, I'm very confident working with my left hand. So, you know, with any kind of skill, it just comes with time. You get more aware of where your fingers are when you can't see them. But every once in a while, you'll spend what feels like 20 minutes trying to find the hole on the bottom. Oh, I had a little knot there. All right, so this color is now done as well. And just because finishing off is one of those things that is a little trickier, I'll just show you again finishing off of this color. The closer you are to the frame, the harder it is to just get your fingers around finishing off. So you'll see it's a little awkward, but we did it. You can always take it out of the frame to finish off. All right, so this one I just put under just 2 of those crossbars. That should be enough to hold it. If I were making a pillow that I wanted to be able to put through the washing machine and stuff, I would be more careful about finishing off with bigger, like a bigger line, more secure, but this is just a little decorative piece.
Okay, I wanted to pop in for a second with some progress. So I have done quite a few colors in the lighthouse. We finished this together. I did make a mistake, and I have been working normally on an 11 count kit. And for 11 count kits, you use 3 strands to make your crosses. And for 14 count, which this canvas is, you use 2, as you know. And I accidentally, when I went for this yellow, grabbed 3 strands. And as you can see, it's a little bit puffier, a little bit messier because I used the wrong number of strands. It looks a little bit different from the rest of the stitching. However, I'm actually going to leave it because I think it doesn't look too bad in the grand scheme of things. And also, that is supposed to be the light. It's supposed to be shining. So I think the puffier look is kind of appropriate. But I just wanted to show you that so you could see, like, I have made a couple of mistakes in this kit and I just kept going. So don't let mistakes derail you. Don't think your work has to be perfect. If I had not pointed that out to you, I bet nobody would have even noticed. So don't get too upset if you make a mistake, if you put a color in the wrong spot, if you do the wrong stitch, you do it the wrong way, or whatever. Your project can still turn out looking very nice. So just keep with it.
All right, I've run into another situation during stitching that I wanted to talk to you about, and that is when the printing doesn't quite align with the holes. So usually when you have a symbol, here's your 4 dots. Let me get right in close. Let's look at this purple one here. You have 4 dots. Those are the holes in your Ada. And usually the symbol is exactly within those 4 holes. But sometimes, and I find it's closer to the edge of the canvas usually, they start to get a little unaligned. So right now I'm working on stitching these red dots. And you need to be careful that even though the red dot, the delineation between the 2 symbols is like somewhere in the middle of this, you want to put your needle down in the holes. So don't follow the symbol 100%, follow the holes. And then, so like I'm actually sticking my needle up through like the middle of that dot, but don't worry, it is the holes that you want to follow as your guideline, and the dots are just there to help you figure out which square you're using. So that looks a little wonky and off kilter if you're looking at the pattern, but that is exactly where the stitch is supposed to go. So hopefully you don't run into this too much. It's one of the more annoying things about stamped cross stitches when the holes don't line up properly. But like I said, it's usually not the entire canvas. If it was ever the entire canvas that was off like that, I would contact the company and see if you can get a replacement, because that would just be too annoying. But most of this kit has been printed perfectly, like even just down a couple of stitches, it's printed more accurately. So it's usually just a small section like that.
All right, so I have finished all of the full stitch that I'm going to do. All of these little dot bits, I did not put stitches on. I'm gonna do those into French knots in our next section. What I am impressed with is how much better it actually looks in real life stitched than it did on the pattern or on the picture. So here's the picture that came in the kit, and the colors look very kind of fake and cartoony. And then if you look at the difference here, this looks like a 3D shiny, really pretty lighthouse, much less cartoony than the real than the picture. And so I'm really impressed with the quality of the stitching, the stitched item, and certainly looks better than that. In our next video, we're gonna go over our finishing stitches, so back stitch and French knots, and I'm actually going to hack the pattern. So I don't like the way that this back stitch looks, so we're actually going to do our own, and I'm going to show you how to back stitch, and then also we'll make our modifications. So I'll see you in the next video.